Blackthorne Valley, a novel by Christopher G. Matten. Part 1, Chapter 1, July 2nd, 1979. The colossal green mountains towered over either side of the lonely stretch of asphalt, penetrating the slate-gray sky. The front windows of the little station wagon were rolled down, letting the summer air flood in and cool the occupants of the vehicle. There was no place more impressively gorgeous than upstate New York. Off to the left, the mountains temporarily receded to expose a small body of water that was so still it reflected the mountains like a mirror. An eagle swept down and landed on the surface, causing ripples to expand from where it sat, disturbing the stillness. Jessica relished in the feeling of the wind that cooled her skin, lifting up her fiery red hair, making it flicker and dance around her pale face. Her emerald eyes stared out the back window, scanning the scenery with exaggerated interest. She was a tall, lean 17-year-old girl with smooth features and a beautiful smile. These features all came along with an uncontrollable knack for receiving unrequested attention from the boys at the orphanage. Not that she cared. She found it amusing to watch them clamor to prove themselves to be the most worthy of her affection. None ever succeeded. She had never dated, and didn't really care to. In her eyes, there were more important matters. Regardless, none of the boys would get their chance. That day was her last in the orphanage. She sat in the cramped back seat of her new parents' station wagon on her way to their new home and her new future. David and Isabel Shane were in their late 50s or early 60s, but hardly showed it. David had a gleaming bald head and joyful hazel eyes. He, like his wife, had been flipping houses since he was in his 20s, and his muscular arms showed it. Isabel was tall and slender, with long gray hair that still had a few strands of black left in it. Her dark Hispanic skin was mildly wrinkled, but not to the extent one might expect to see from a woman in her early 60s. Together, and with the aid of their new daughter, they would take on their biggest challenge yet, and finally settle down. Jessica looked forward to her new life as a Shane. Life up to that point was normal. At least, as normal as it could be with her condition. Jessica was mute. No doctor could ever explain why. They assumed that it was psychological, something about childhood trauma. Fortunately, her new mother was fluent in sign language. And of course, that wasn't to mention the amnesia. They passed a green sign that read, Blackthorne Valley, next exit. Not long after, David turned right onto the exit. It connected to another road, Andromeda Way, like a T. A little wooden sign with peeling, faded paint read, Welcome to Blackthorne Valley, with a leopard painted next to the black text. David turned right onto Andromeda Way, and they passed over the threshold of the town. Jessica instantly felt a jolt of pain explode inside of her, consuming every part of her body. Her entire body tensed up, and she gasped for breath. Her stomach felt like it was trying to crawl away. Her hand shot out and grabbed the back of her new mother's seat. Isabel turned around in her seat and gasped when she saw Jessica's rigid state. "David, pull over," she cried, grabbing his shoulder. David looked at her and then at Jessica. When he saw Jessica, his reaction mirrored that of his wife's, and he quickly pulled the car to the side of the road. Jessica threw the door open and collapsed out of the car, wheezing. She crawled back to her knees and bent her neck forward, vomiting all over the grass. What came out was as black as ink and smelled like rotten flesh. Once she had finished spewing the rancid chemical all over the grass, she felt all of her muscles relax. All of the pain she had felt vanished as she weakly stood back on her feet. Isabella hopped out of the car and helped her up. "Oh my, Jessica, are you okay?" Isabel asked. Her face was pale, and her hands shook slightly. Jessica nodded her head. David got out of the car and leaned on the roof, looking across to Jessica. "Think we need to get her to a doctor?" he asked. His face was nervous, but thoughtful. Jessica shook her head. "I'm fine," she signed. "I just ate something rancid, I guess." Isabel pursed her lips nervously. "Are you sure? That looked pretty awful." Jessica nodded her head once more, and Isabel sighed. We're almost at the house. Let's just keep driving. Once we're there, she can rest, David said. Okay, Isabel sighed. She held Jessica's door open until she was in the car, and then climbed in herself. Andromeda Way showed no signs of civilization. The road was bordered by 2 walls of trees that held black, dense forestry and animal life. There weren't even any visible power lines until they reached the little dirt road that branched off from the main road to the right. The narrow dirt road crawled back into the woods, turning slightly about 50 feet down. Jessica was unable to see the end of the dirt path. David turned onto the little dirt road. A tree to the left of the entrance to the dirt path had the number 12 bolted to it. When they reached the end of the dirt road, Jessica discovered that it was actually a driveway. The house at the end of the driveway was a large, Victorian mansion. The once gray paint peeled away from the wood, which was cracked and warped in various spots. Ivy carpeted the east half of the house, almost entirely concealing 6 tall, church-like windows. 2 turrets protruded from the roof of the mansion on either side. A wraparound porch bordered the west side of the building, with a saggy, rotten overhang casting a dark shadow over the wooden floor. Jessica felt the wood sink beneath her feet as she walked up the 2 ancient steps to the porch. There were 2 massive oak doors, completely bordered by semicircle windows, that was so cracked, dirty, it was nearly impossible to see through. She grabbed onto the brass knob of the left door, pulled it open. A burst of heat hit her as she stepped into the ancient building. The air was stale and ancient, radiating with memories and history far surpassing her own age. The foyer was just as grand, yet just as ruined as the outside. The red carpet was torn and dirty, and so moth-eaten in some places. Beneath was entirely exposed. The moths that ravaged the floor had clearly accessed the curtains as well. Long brass rods sat above the windows, with thin strips of dirty cloth hanging from them. A large, golden candle chandelier that dangled from a rusty chain on the ceiling was entirely shrouded by cobwebs. 2 slightly bowed stairways on either end of the room sloped upwards to a balcony, which continued as a hallway at either end. To the right was another set of double doors. One of those doors hung loosely on only one hinge, revealing a long dining room, which was the room with the tall, church-like windows. On the left was a single door, which sat open, revealing a dusty library, with a wooden set of spiral stairs in the center. There was one more doorway, which possessed no doors, directly beneath the balcony, and between both stairways, which led to a crumbling kitchen. "Why don't you go pick out your room, hon? Master bedroom is ours, of course. Any other room is yours, though," Isabel said sweetly. Jessica nodded and made her way up the right stairway. She turned right and made her way to the end of that hallway, which had a dusty window above an end table. The end table had a little dirty vase on top of it, with a long dead bouquet of roses. The gray wallpaper in the hallway was peeling away, revealing the darkened wood beneath it. When Jessica reached the end of the hallway, there were 2 doors directly across from each other. She opened the door to her left, revealing a cramped bathroom, with a small porcelain toilet directly next to a metal bathtub on clawed feet that hardly fit in the room. The toilet was barely 2 inches across the sink, almost touching it. A dirty and slightly cracked mirror hung above the sink. The door across from the bathroom led to a small, poorly lit, circular room, which consisted only of a staircase that wound around the walls, disappearing into the ceiling. Jessica followed the staircase up, and found herself in a beautiful bedroom, with a large 4-poster bed on one side, and an oak wardrobe directly across from it. There were 2 large, spiderweb-like windows, facing the front and back of the house, with windowsills that were almost 2 feet thick. The window facing north was completely covered, on the outside, with ivy. Jessica knew immediately that she was standing in the turret on the east side of the building. Jessica walked over to the window facing the front of the house, and sat on the ledge as if it were a bench, when she heard a shrill ringing bell from the bottom of her bedroom stairs. She walked over and noticed a wooden board above her bedroom door with several bells mounted on it, labeled doorbell, master bedroom, kitchen, library, dining room, lounge, and basement. The ringing bell was the one labeled doorbell. Jessica walked back to the balcony in the foyer to see her parents allowing 4 police officers into their home.